Hello, welcome to the Crackpod Podcast.
A beautiful day to start up a revolution. Molotov cocktails, martini shotgun shells. Wild, 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 wild one. God forbid the cops get called. I say the more the merrier inside this free. See it all. I got front row tickets to the greatest show of all.
Welcome to the Crackpot Podcast.
Hey, Wayne.
So we talked yesterday about the fake meat at the grocery store, and I really love grocery content. I hope you listeners love it too, but I just feel I just love it when you talk about grocery stores.
Oh, okay. Well, it's the only thing I'm a proven expert at.
No, it's one of many things. I enjoy.
Yeah.
What I really enjoy is the breadth. The variety of things, right? Like ancient boxing, grocery, stick fighting, plantation America. We can go just all over the place. So.
Hey, the schizophrenia is not a barrier. To a wide range of near successes. Okay.
Oh.
So,
it
works just fine if you're seeking a multitude of mediocrity.
Stop.
I'm talking about sales. I'm pleased with the nonfiction and fiction content I've done in different categories. I'm talking about
sales.
Yeah.
So. The reason that the sales are not what they might be is because you're not a social media guy flogging your book and building up loyal. People are looking for this. It feels funny to think about kind of building a following, but people like it. They like you. They're looking for people, interesting people to talk to. So if you were on Twitter all day long posting your Amazon links, you would sell a whole lot more. But you have better things to do.
You know what? It's not that I'm operating from some higher plane of non-material metaphysics. The fact is, if I looked like Bart Manny, the guy that manages the Taboo webpage, I'd be posting pictures of me with like little Latinas sitting on my shoulders in bikinis with me just like wearing Speedos or something, like every day. Okay,
that's true.
I'd be whoring it up, but
and you'd be making money because oh, that's so cute. You'd be making money because you would be selling. Those guys don't really sell books. They sell like courses about how to be a big badass guy like myself. Like do you want this life? Then you buy this course. Like I don't know what it is. They have weekend courses.
Hey, I'd be going down the labor ready, rental workers centers and finding the biggest black dude there and like paying him to like be my uke for the day. And, I'd grab his finger and he'd wince and go down on one knee and beg, please, Jimmy, please. I mean, like I said, if I looked like something, if I was young, I'm not saying I wouldn't be out there.
If you had a smartphone.
Right. Well, that's the idea. Even the dudes at Labor Ready, most of them will have smartphones.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Smartphone, look big and scary. Okay, let's cut some self-defense videos. And Yeah, so it's, but I have been chronologically eroded and placed into the armpit of reality. So uh, I'm feigning the higher road in reality. I'm just getting by with what I can get by with at this stage. Okay.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking yesterday we talked about the Red Scare girls, and I went back and checked their Patreon. Those girls are clearing 20 grand a month on Patreon.
Well,
And then
that's how they maintain those skeletal figures. That's a lot of heroin to fire.
that's a lot. Yeah, heroin, cocaine, premium cigarettes. Um, you can actually, I listened to a few minutes. I thought, I've been talking about these girls so much, I need to listen to it. And I listened to a few minutes, and they're just chit-chatting, just like we do. But you can hear the cigarettes, so, that's something that I don't do. Um, but anyway, good job, girls.
Okay.
Good job getting those shekels. So, so we were talking about this fake meat in the grocery where they have this, you called it a coffin, which is the open frozen foods case in
The
this little
coffin
grocery.
cases
Yeah.
are now all being used in meat departments. They used to be a standard part of the frozen food department. It's really difficult to get people to work them properly. I was the only guy I ever knew that worked the coffin case selection properly, and actually tore my subscapularis doing it because it's hard on your back. They are efficient because it's like a cooler, and even with the doors, the air still spills out every time you open the door. The best cases to work in merchandise are the vertical open cases, which are the most energy inefficient. They've basically been phased out as freezers, and they've been repurposed for refrigerators for the most part. And then even then, they'll hang screens on the front of them. They go good in the meat aisle, so they're still using them because they're still energy efficient. That they're still using them in that meat aisle for frozen meat. It's really shocking that much space has been allocated in any supermarket. So this is, as a retail food geek, it's to me, it's ominous, like Custer's Crow Indian Scouts seeing 3,000 ponies in that valley in a little bighorn. It's like, oh wow, this is bigger than I thought. Okay, so
Look at this adorable picture of you.
yeah, that's when I was 143 pounds.
So cute.
Right.
Working that's a coffin case, right? Is that frozen
Yes.
vegetables?
Yeah, that's a coffin case, and you could see, I think we had the baby food. I stocked the baby food too. It was over top of it.
Yeah, baby food is another topic that's good to talk about. But where I was going with this is that they have all this fake meat, and at the same time we're taping. This is February 1st. We're in the sort of accelerating phase of this Chinese virus, the Wuhan coronavirus, and there's all these competing ideas about where it comes from because there is a biolab there in Wuhan, and there's connections to other labs and Chinese nationals working I think they were working in Canada, who were sending coronavirus samples from their lab in Canada to Wuhan. And so there's all this stuff, but there's also this idea of this food market out there where they sell like live animals or unrefrigerated dead animals. They sell like wild caught animals. They're looking at bats as potentially a carrier of this thing. And so part of the response to all this is that any comment you might make about either the hygiene or the palatability of this cuisine is racist, and that we have no leg to stand on as Westerners because we rely on beef and factory farms and this and that. So I see this push for fake meat as part of the denaturing and deracinating process, cultural dismantling process, that we can't even eat beef. Beef is just something I think about a lot for some reason, but think about beef and cattle, everything from the Hindus who worship the cow to all the way over to Spain, who are still doing, they actually still leap bulls, and they do the running of the bulls and bullfighting. And you have in the Bible the golden calf, and you have the Minoans with all their art and the bull leaping. And to me, it's just inseparable from, and I mean, this goes to my culture too, because in South America, beef is important. So to me, it's like a big deal when you tell me that beef is wrong to eat, beef harms the environment, when in fact, beef ranching is absolutely native to North America. It used to be bison, and now it's various types of cattle, but still you need grazers. The prairie needs to be grazed. So I take it really personally, and I just wanted to update you on on this thing.
Well, as much as I like pork, the people of the Bible, I think, they were pretty prescient when they essentially outlawed pork farming. It probably had to do with poor water sourcing in their areas and how bad pigs are for the maintenance of a clean water supply. But all the viruses that come out of China essentially come out of the pork population or the domestic avian population. The scientists have been more scared about the avian flus than the swine flus, even though the swine flu seems to have been what wiped out like 50 million people in 1919. The Spanish influenza, it was called. There's an excellent story by Alice B. Sheldon, who wrote as James Tiptree Jr. She was a CIA photo analyst in the 60s and early 70s. And she wrote a story called The Last Flight of Dr. An. It's a very pleasing short story. There's an older Asian gentleman at an airport feeding birds as people who were coughing and sneezing and coming down with the flu are going through the airport, and he's feeding birds at airports to spread an avian flu amongst humans. He's basically trying to wipe out humanity using birds as carriers of a flu virus. I wouldn't be surprised if this is engineered. The CDC and other agencies in the United States have done everything they can to keep things like smallpox, who have been eradicated around the world, alive in labs. These diseases have escaped from labs.
It's quite likely that Lyme's disease is an escaped pathogen from Plum Island, yeah.
That's African American nationalists have often cited the fact that 10% of Caucasian men cannot be infected with HIV. Okay, as evidence that this was engineered as an African eradication pathogen at some point, which I don't believe, but that suspicion is out there. I think if there was, that's probably going to be something that's going to be used to engineer a virus. There's two interesting books by a guy named Craig Bear, who was the son-in-law of Paul Anderson, who is one of the best science fiction writers ever. Craig Bear is an excellent science fiction writer. He wrote something called Blood Music, which was about a biotech guy that engineers a version of E. coli that ends up replicating itself, trying to imitate his bodily structure and become self-aware. It's called Blood Music. Excellent, big novel. The other one is something called Quantico. He got access to the FBI facility at Quantico to write this novel, and it was about a version of anthrax being engineered to target a specific religious subset of the Caucasian population. okay, as a way to eradicate these people. And the FBI is trying to fight white supremacists who are out there trying to push this virus out there to wipe out, their hated little cousins. And that was very well executed. It was totally cucked out in terms of all the bad guys being 36-and-a-half-year-old, Caucasian Christian Americans, with nothing better to do than to try to commit genocide. So, but again, he did an excellent job. He does excellent research. He's always been very strong on science, so I tried to read him a lot because I'm by definition weak on science as a science fiction writer. So I read him and Ben Bova for people that are strong on science. And, I'm strong on social and cultural and characterization stuff, like his father-in-law, Paul Anderson. So anyhow, I'd recommend those things. If there's anything that totally scares the shit out of me, it's the apocalyptic engineered virus.
Well, this may very well be it. There is some, and hey, I am by no means an expert in this stuff, so I'm just repeating some of the things that I've seen. I can't really evaluate these statements. But they're saying that the virus contains long stretches of HIV DNA, and that can't really be explained by any natural means, so that's quite likely that was inserted intentionally. What I have said, I've said it on this podcast, and I've said it in real life, is that the Chinese government, number one thing that the Chinese government does well is kill Chinese people throughout history. So it would not surprise me one bit if it was intentional or unintentional, but that it does turn out to be something that, the Communist Party just had in their back pocket, or I don't know. I mean, it's very easy for me to believe that.
Well, the one thing that you want to keep in mind, Plagues and People is one of the best books I've read on this subject. Outside of diseases that have come out of Africa, which would include bubonic plague, which eventually it seems like it came from Ethiopia to India to Central Asia, then to Europe and the Americas. Bubonic plague, Ebola, HIV, scarlet fever, and malaria. All these come out of Africa. These don't seem to have anything to do with the domestication of animals. Okay? There's something that comes from wild animals or insects to people, and they describe what he called the microparasitic zone, which was the equatorial zones where civilizations just could not thrive because the macroparasitic political entities, once they built up enough control over enough people, these people get wiped out by these diseases. So he staged it as basically a competition between the macroparasitic human political entities and the microparasitic entities. And it's not until the 20th century that this is overcome. That's a real interesting theory that grabbed me. But what he points out, all diseases in the temperate zone that really hurt humans come from domestic animals, except maybe typhus, which is going to come from overcrowding, and I think it comes from lice.
I think that's right. I think rats, is it
rats
plague?
Rats will carry the bubonic plague. So other than introducing, and of course, domestic animals will do a lot to introduce fleas, which carry these things.
Right.
Okay, and lice to carry these things. So this could come down to domestication of dogs and cats, which prey on rats, and then get these things in there. But most of our classic diseases, for instance, like smallpox, chickenpox, cowpox, and different types of influenza, these all hop over from the domestic animal population to the human population. So they're really, not only does malnutrition strike the agrarian, but once you get agrarian levels of crowding with heavy domestication of animals, once the nomads conquer the farmers, then you also get all of these animal-borne pathogens hopping over to humanity. So you've got that there that seems to be baked into the cake, which keeps the human population from growing exponentially until you run into the late 1800s and vaccines, and then the early 1900s and antibiotics. I would have been dead I don't know, 18 years ago, at least 12 years ago, before antibiotics. The first time I got pneumonia, I would have just checked out. Okay, so if you think about what that does, everything that I've written, almost everything that I've written and published has been done in what would have been the post-mortem phase of my life. 200 years ago, most of my work, like Jack London was much better and much quicker writer than me. If he lived to be as old as me, he would have already written more than I did. But antibiotics allowed me to survive long enough to write in middle age, where a lot of pre-modern writers, pre-antibiotic and pre-vaccine writers, they might get one or two books out and then they get sick and they start limping towards death's door, and they never developed a great body of work.
Yeah, I was going to say that even if it wouldn't kill you, these things kind of we take for granted something like that. If your kid gets an ear infection, a kid could get over that on his own without antibiotics, but each time that happens, he'll suffer a little bit of hearing loss or a lot of hearing loss. And so it's also getting you into adulthood and through adulthood with more of your capabilities intact, so you're not like this shriveled, crippled person who had a terrible pneumonia, grew up with bad lungs, and just never developed, so you had more of that kind of sickliness, I think, as well, even if it didn't result in outright death. I think that the Black Plague is still paying dividends to Europeans. Black Plague took, I think, was like at least a third of Europeans, and that may be what is still protecting Europeans from AIDS or HIV and possibly from this virus as well. So hey, some of your ancestors didn't make it through that, and now that's protecting us.
In the high Middle Ages, the best part of the Middle Ages in England, the life expectancy for an agricultural worker that survived their first 5 years of life was 24 years. 24 years. Now, I ruptured my first disc when I was 20, working as a laborer. I managed to just tough that out. When I was 30, I sneezed, and I had a back injury that would have had me thrown out in the potter's field and buried while I was still half dead if I was in plantation America or in medieval Europe. Most of us, just with 95% of Maryland and Virginia laborers in the 1600s, did not make it to 20 years of age. Okay, they just died. They just were worked to death, malnutrition, disease, and labor would just kill them. And this is a lot of most of our ancestors through most of antiquity and up through the early modern era. So if we go back, if we have to go back technologically, we're better off going all the way back to Paleolithic conditions and not going back to primitive farming conditions.
I agree with that. Oh, those are cute pants. The girls, of their own accord, decided to go through their drawers and get rid of clothes that don't fit or are too old. So I'm sure there's quite a scene in there, but I'm not going to go in there for a while.
I'm not trying not to be rude here, but the wonderful next door neighbors have just invited me to breakfast for a spinach omelet, and I'm turning that down. Thanks,
Aww.
bro. Doing radio spot. I won't have to explain to him what a podcast is. Okay. These are just such wonderful people out here. All right. I've 210-pound dogs sitting outside the door in the rain, in the mud, waiting for me to come out and taking them into the mountains to hunt for Bigfoot and graze. And the neighbors want to feed me. So
are there going to be dogs in Night Song of the Nords?
I am addressing that in the fifth chapter. I've written the first 3 chapters. So there will be some canine allies of the last Nords that Fenn finds in the Pacific Northwest when he gets over the glaciers. All right, so there you go. So we'll have like 30 Vikings to fight off the armies of African Catholic Crusaders and mestizo hordes. I have a cybernetic pope.
Nice.
With one eye.
Of course. I do. Ever since you started having these cluster headaches again, I've noticed that there's a lot of one-eyed characters coming into the fiction.
Right. So it'll be the cybernetic pope with one eye, with a big sonic mace, and a black coat. And he's called the Dictator. Okay, so he will. So the people that are introduced in the prequel Malediction song, they finally come against this survivor of the Reverend Chandler saga, which is Fenn, who was like the weakest guy of the seven. He's the only one that survived, and now he's going to have to help, with these Nordic refugees battle against the crazed Catholics, total crusader assholes. So this is being written from both perspectives.
Oh.
From the perspective of the Nords, every other chapter will be the Nords, and then the other will be the perspective of the Crusaders that are going after the Nords. And both sections will be written sympathetically, too. Okay?
I like that.
Totally schizophrenic exercise in writing. In the morning, I'll get up and write the Nords, and then I'll go for a walk, and then I'll come back and I'll write from the point of view of the Crusaders.
Well, speaking of race war, let's talk about Baltimore.
Amen. Squeegee Kids?
Squeegee Kids, yeah. Okay, so I follow Justin Fenton, who's a great reporter from the Baltimore Sun.
And a hipster faggot.
And a hipster
But I'm a boomer faggot, so, Justin, if you're listening, it's not. No.
He doesn't
So bad.
Thank goodness. He's very, he loves Baltimore, right? He's like proud that he still lives there. He loves it, and I appreciate that. So, and a big problem in Baltimore is that constantly people are killing each other. All right.
Yeah, it's like the Lord of the Rings. If in the Fellowship of the Ring, the orcs of Isengard were constantly, killing the orcs out of Mordor. It's basically like orc on orc crime constantly in Baltimore.
Right. And it's very perplexing to really nice young men like Justin Fenton. But so there's a new problem which isn't entirely new because you've been writing about it decades ago. But he's been talking about this problem of the squeegee boys where the squeegee... Oh, those are tights for under a dress. So he's got this picture here, and he says, I really hope with all the actual issues we have in the city that these two police cars aren't posted here because of the squeegee boy hysteria. I really hope that's not the case.
I've seen a recent video of squeegee kids breaking a windshield and threatening to kill the people inside because they didn't want their windows squeegeed. Now, I got to give you a great story from 1982. Nabisco Bill. Okay. Now, the best cookie vendor job, the best vendor job, DSD job you could get back in the day was working for Nabisco. You were your own boss. Okay. You had a lot of promo money. Store managers all loved to see you. And Nabisco Bill looked like an FBI agent. Well, he was a retired FBI agent. This was his retirement job. And he just had this air about him. Even though he had a feather duster in his back pocket, nobody ever joked with him. Nobody ever picked on him. You usually pick on these guys if you're like the local grocery manager. And he didn't used to be a grocery manager. He used to be a federal thug. And even the store owners that I worked for would Miss Betty would look up at Nabisco Bill and ask him advice what's Giant doing with their cookie displays? Could you tell us and help us out? And he's very gracious and everything. Great guy. He used to train Army intelligence people at Fort Meade to interrogate the enemy. And he told us while we were back in the produce room eating cookies. He was giving us vanilla wafers, and we were drinking coffee, and he was regaling us with a story about how he used to train Army intelligence guys on real Vietnamese POWs that were supposedly never in the United States in the early 1970s. So he's supervising the torture of foreign nationals at Fort Meade in the United States, okay? The certifiable badass, totally cool guy, tall and lean. He would be the lead FBI guy in any made-for-Netflix FBI, like, serial killer thing or whatever. Just a really awesome guy. He's a little bit shook up one day when he comes to the store. And Ron Bone is the guy I write him at. Ron Bone's like, "What's the matter? You look kind of shook up. Did you finally let some faggot give you a blowjob? I mean, what's up, Bill?" Because Rob would always do something to try to, like, undermine anybody's masculinity, right? So Bill looks at him in disgust. He's always trying to get Bill off of his game. He says, "No, but I must tell you, Robert, I'm out of sorts." And I can't tell you the rest of his wording. But what happened, he was on North Avenue. He was going to Stop, Shop, and Save, which we used to call Stop, Shop, and Rob. So if you weren't on your A game as a chain store grocery manager and you couldn't land the retirement, like DSD vendor job to get out of the stores, you ended up being a grocery manager at Stop, Shop, and Save, which we called Stop, Shop, and Rob. It was owned by a black dude named Baines, okay? So Nabisco Bill's in his big old early 1950s Cadillac that he kept in mint condition, windows down, driving down North Avenue, which has always been very bad for as long as I've been alive, and some squeegee kid comes up to his window. And Bill's never rude to anybody. The kid said, "Hey, mister, 25 cents will do your windows." And he says, "No, I wash my own car. Thank you very much." And he looks straight ahead, and he hears a click, and he looks over, and there's the muzzle of a .32 caliber revolver pressed against his temple. This is a 9-year-old kid who robs Nabisco Bill. Just like takes his whole wallet, okay? And, I mean, Bill always packed a gun, but he's like, he had me dead to rights. And, it was like, yeah, this squeegee kid got me. We thought it was really funny, and he told us as a lesson. He says, "This is a lesson to all you guys. Yeah, I'm packing a gun. I was once a very dangerous man, and a 9-year-old kid robbed me." He said the 25 cents would have been a good investment in goodwill. It would have prevented this.
Yeah. I have a family member who lives lives part of the year in a bad city in Brazil, and she has to keep change in her car because the children come up, and you just have to hand something over when you're in your car. She describes going to the bank, how you have to drive up to the bank, you sit there and you look around, you try to spot if someone is casing you out, right? This is like spy versus spy, and they have this procedure. They don't go alone because people will just rob you for cash. But I want to read this from Justin Fenton. All right, he says, "It's just weird to drive to a homicide scene past 2 units set up at an intersection because people are really upset about their windshields being washed." And a man here who I don't know, he goes by Steve O. He says, "Yes, they are upset with, quotes, windshields being washed." And Justin responds, "Because that's how it starts. They're there to make money by washing windshields. People who don't want that curse them out, drive at them, etc., and things go from there. Yes, it's about people being upset about their windshields being washed, Steve-O." And then another man, Pete, says, "Justin, guess your wife hasn't had her windshield chipped when they smashed the squeegee and side window punched after she politely said no. Called me in hysterics with my kids in the car. GTFOH." That means get the fuck out of here.
Well, Justin does have to keep his job, okay? Yeah. He writes for the Sun paper.
No,
he's got to defend these people.
He's a true believer. And he says, "My wife and I both separately had experiences with squeegee kids that did not this week that did not end this way. What did you do? So he's accusing drivers of harassing squeegee kids, and then squeegee kids justifiably damaging your car or attacking. It's just he's so dumb.
He's part of the system of control. He's a priest, okay? And there's only one kind of crime that's permitted any airtime in Baltimore, and that is killings. No home invasion has ever happened in Baltimore City, ever. The squeegee kids are not practicing extortion. There are no robberies in Baltimore. Nobody gets beat up and robbed on the street in Baltimore. Anybody that gets killed who is not an African American, it's their fault. Anybody that commits the murder who is an African American, it is the fault of people who don't want their windshields wiped by these kids on the way to work. This is the whole system of control is set up there. Over half of people of Justin's race that I know in Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and Harford County believe as he does. They worship as he does. And he's just maintaining this whole system of control that's really a mind fuck is what it is. And everybody is basically just accepting this. Almost everybody accepts some version of what he's saying there.
Which, if you dig in, it must be something like that racism causes more problems than anything else on the planet, that poverty also causes problems, even though some poor people behave in completely non-criminal ways, but that all this criminal activity can be attributed to the unequal distribution of wealth. And it's just a hell of a way to explain what this guy is absolutely surrounded by every day of his life, and the system of explanation that he has is just bizarre.
I've been attacked hundreds of times in Baltimore. Over 90% of these attacks were by people who had more financial assets than I did on their person and in the background, including cops who always made more money than me, except for the short period when I was a store manager, and I only had 2 threats from cops when I was a store manager. When I was a poor guy walking on the street in ratty clothes, threats from cops all the time. Every hood rat that tries to come after me, he's got a smartphone. I got a flip phone. This guy's got a $1,000 device on him. I got something that was $50 for my communication. All right. Half of these hood rats are in automobiles. People go traditionally. The medieval knight committed most of the violence in the medieval world against peasants and serfs who had less money than him. The Roman legionnaire, one Roman legionnaire had as many assets as a barbarian king financially. And they go out and they're the aggressors in almost all these wars. People with more money attack people with less money. That's almost always the way it goes. Every once in a while, you get periods when you get poor barbarians, they go after some teetering empire, and then you get the poor pillaging the rich. But in situations that you have now, when you have a household of 6, where the mother of this household is getting $800 a month for each of these 5 kids that she's got, and I'm only making $1,200 a month, and these kids are coming after me, I'm the poor being attacked by the relatively rich. This is just the way it always goes. The homeless guys get attacked the most. They're getting jacked up by cops, private security, and kids who have smartphones. I've had people use smartphones to triangulate my position and hunt me down on the street. I've had guys use their smartphone to call the cops on me when I wouldn't let them rob me. So it's the redneck construction workers who used to buy their cocaine in Baltimore and then threaten to recreationally beat me up for being poor white trash on foot on the street. I was a night crew clerk in a supermarket. Each one of these guys is making twice as much money as me, and there's 2 or 3 of them. You're looking at $150,000 against $15,000. This is the way the drug dealer that's making $8 to $10 an hour on the street corner is constantly being executed by a drug enforcer who's making $100,000 a year. This is police brutality. It's always a cop making $50,000 to $100,000 a year, once you count in his benefits, jacking up some drug dealer who, again, is making $8 to $10 an hour working on a street corner. It's almost always the rich attacking the poor. That's the way it's almost always gone. In plantation America, you had the Indians who were eating a protein diet, who had firearms, policing the European American slaves who were eating nothing but corn and aren't allowed to own guns. And the Indians are in alliance with the super elite top 200 guys in Plantation, Virginia, who are rolling in dough. It is always aggression, almost always aggression of the rich against the poor. That's what every police state is about. Every police state operates that way. Every police officer, every federal cop makes more money than a supermarket manager. Okay, so even when I was a supermarket manager, this is still the same dynamic. I mean, I wasn't making $80,000 a year as a supermarket manager. I wasn't making any more money than the two cops that threatened me when I was a supermarket manager.
And as a supermarket manager, your duties were just, looking after a store, but then every kind of like social work and personal law enforcement of your own little territory that you had to defend. So yeah. It's not like you were just stocking shelves or filling out, building up your schedule for the week of who was coming in when. You were.
My main job was private security.
Yeah, you're doing like, I don't know how to describe it. Like what we talked about this for Under an Iron Crown. Essentially, what a petty king would have to do to protect his domain.
My job one was to protect 110 people from themselves and others. That was my first job. Including my bimbo boss, who might decide to go off on some 300-pound mandingo wench and start screaming at her and pointing her little pale finger at her. I'd have to protect her from the consequences of her actions too. So job one was to be the protector. So I guess I did use that experience. Gordon, I forget his last name. I wouldn't say it anyhow. Gordon was the last name of the Ghana boy who was basically my co-king. He was pure African, and I was mongrel European, so we were like the perfect typical H. Rider Haggard, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Robert E. Howard, men who would be kings in some kind of lost valley.
Yeah.
Right. So please say a prayer for Nabisco Bill wherever he is. Hopefully that 9-year-old boy is not overseeing his decline in an old age home. Okay.
It's just the indignance of this guy to dismiss the concerns of people in their cars who just want, if this is and this goes back to, medieval or earlier society where the safety of the roads, was not guaranteed. You had to contend with bandits. And right. Then later it was the safety of the seas, you had to contend with pirates. So we're going backwards in time in certain ways, but it's just his indignance rankles me.
That's good. Most of the people like him will not reproduce. They are cultivating conditions in which the rest of us will be attacked. So those of us who decide not to reproduce and decide to whine about it on the internet or call for more police help from the politicians, they will get washed out in a eugenic process. And then those people who accept the responsibility to defend themselves and their folk against the crime that's been cultivated by the deluded priesthood, and if you think about it, the classic Christian priest does not breed. What he does, his job is to perpetuate the ethics and the system of control of the oversystem, the overmind. So these atheistic asshole media people, they literally inherited the mantle of the universal Christian church. Just a system of control to keep the working people down and keep the oligarchs on top. So eventually they're going to create conditions. They're going to create dark age conditions, which is going to create a flowering of the heroic worldview amongst individual people.
I hope so. I think so. I
You
think
know,
it's emerging.
women who have children and aggression out of their men. Yeah, it's going to happen. You know, so things are cyclic.
Yeah.
So I feel uplifted. Thank you for all that good.
Well, you were telling me that you have been surveying TV commercials there.
Yes.
And tomorrow, so we're
Okay.
taping February 1st, so tomorrow is the high holy holiday of the big, most important game. And my local
Yes.
team is playing, but we will not be watching that. We just don't celebrate. But
Yeah, so it's Felon Ball Sunday. Now, I've been watching History Channel stuff. Gator Hunters and Forged in Fire are the two shows that the Colonel watches. I've been watching this with him and his wife. His wife mentioned how disturbed she was that all of a sudden this year, it seems every other commercial features a white man and a mixed race African American wife. Now, this is new. This is very new because what's been being pushed for the past 10 years is the mixed race African American man and the white wife. That is generally what has been pushed. I told them, I said, for the past 3 days, I've been counting. I was up to 62, and then I saw William Shatner on the History Channel, which targets a 95+% Caucasian demographic. Over 3 days, 62 commercials in a row, there was represented and usually focused upon a person from 13% of the U.S. population, a demographic almost none of whom watches any of this material. What, you have like 26% of the population is Latino, and they're not represented in a single commercial. So, and all of these commercials are engineered by white people. Okay, so I mean, this is just who the enemy is. The enemy is white people. Those are the people who are setting up this 13% as an object of martyrdom and worship that are supposed to be morally superior to all of us. And you can't. The commercial with William Shatner is the very first commercial in 3 days that doesn't feature part of the sacred 13% of the population. I mean, it's just really ridiculous. The total brainwashing, even in something that focuses on the activities of left behind Caucasian people. And there's one thing that I like. There's a show called Forged in Fire where people it's a contest in making knives. And I never thought I'd be interested in it. As long as it would cut or stab, I really didn't give a shit. Okay? I was never interested in the craft aspect of making blades. And what I've really found uplifting about this show, even though I had to sit through all these brain dead commercials, is most of the contestants who have their own forges and are making knives at home, they are 18 to 22-year-old European American men. And that's who's doing this. And you can see in the future, this is going to be another set-aside niche. I think eventually there's going to be a law passed that there has to be 100% employment amongst European American men. 100% of them have to have a job. If they do not have a job, they will either go into a penitentiary work program or they will have to go into the military to actually enforce racial laws against their own people. I really think that this is like a 100% done deal, already in the works, going to happen. But you're still going to have, even in that worst case scenario, you're still going to have a situation where the only people out there making stuff are going to be our people.
Oh.
That's it. There's always going to be some kind of value. Now, I do think, like the medieval and early modern blacksmith and swordsmith, he will be a slave. But there's no move to exterminate this guy because he's the only guy that's ever going to make anything that works.
Okay,
so his dark masters are not going to wipe him out.
You're right that he's the only one that makes something that works. I just sent this morning to my sibling group. We have a sibling chat, and I just sent them this link to a picture of a crankshaft that goes in a tanker ship. The crankshaft weighs 300 tons. Look at that. Just
Wow.
imagine the motor that it turns a screw for a ship. The engine generates 109,000 horsepower at 102 RPM. And my sibling group likes this kind of stuff, so I put them in there. But there's people call it on our part of Twitter, they call it weaponized autism. But I think of it as obsession. I think of it as obsession and attention to detail, and I just think of the great inventors and innovators of our history. I think, and these were guys who were just obsessed with their work and their topics, and with more than one topic. They were not single-minded, but they were incredibly focused and obsessed. And so you have guys now that are 3D printing gun parts and then using electric current to deposit metal. So they're actually making rifled barrels, which is really, rifling a barrel is a big technological advance in firearms, and it's not easy to do. You need big, machines and precision machines and stuff, and they've figured out how to do it with 3D printing and then a bucket of water with electrical leads dunked into it. So it's just really cool. This is what our guys do, and they do it without really anyone telling them to do it. They do it out of hobbies. And so on one hand, it's a big threat to the system because you just don't know what these guys are up to. But on the other hand, like you say, the system needs them to work.
Right. And this is why licensing for things like being a gunsmith is in place. Okay. You're eventually going to go back to artisan servitude, where anybody who is an artisan of any kind is going to be a leashed slave of the oligarchs. That's the way it has to be. That's natural. That's the natural state of civilization. And that's where it's going to go back to. And you don't need that high level of curious intellect to be a soldier. To be a successful general, yeah. But to be a soldier, no. So the oligarchs are going to use as many lower order people in their military, paramilitary, and police as possible. And they will, of course, be under the supervision of 100% Caucasian special forces cadres, okay, that are going to manage them. And you got the pilot program in Baltimore, where you've got federal agents essentially managing all the drug busts, behind the scenes, pulling the puppet strings. So now if you're really a good caulk cop, CAUC, I think should probably be a new code word, a good caulk cop, in a place like Baltimore, he's going to want to apply for a federal position so he could do real work. And not have to be caught up in all the corruption of the local guys and their capers skimming off the drug dealers and beating up hookers and stuff like that for side money. So, there's always going to be a place to be a warrior, but you're pretty much going to have to be on the side of the system, and you're going to be enforcing the enslavement of other people of your kind. But within that, you're going to have, if you're looking at something like Blade Runner, I was listening to Borzoi and I guess Alex McNabb talking about this last week, you're going to have a system, anarcho-tyranny is going to feed a system that's going to have a lot of good corruption in it. The system's going to have to keep gunsmiths operating out there, but then they'll also be dealing on the side with people who are into autonomy and are not part of the system or even against the system. So the system's always going to have the seeds of its own destruction in it. So I feel very good about that. And eventually we can finally get back to a pure form of barbarism. So
I think so too. I wanted to go back to the commercial, the survey you were doing of the commercials, and because I remembered that some weeks ago Pete Buttchugger got in trouble because he it was in November, because he had some kind of campaign materials, and can you see this? They use a stock photo of a nice black mom, and she's looking adoringly at her child. And do these look like African Americans to you?
Oh, that chick's African. She's not African American.
This is a stock photo taken in Kenya, and he used it a comprehensive investment in the empowerment of Black America. So that was his campaign materials, and they couldn't even.
That's not Black America. and see, and again, okay, so we look at a lady from East Africa. She's probably got some kind of Arabic in her. You could tell by her skin tone. But the people in East Africa, there's a lot of different distinct looks that you don't see in West Africa. African Americans almost all come from West Africa. And I think, on average, they're like 24% European or something like that. Yeah, and you get a totally different look. It's the guys winning the marathons and everything are from a totally different part of Africa. So this is very different. And one thing, a couple guys that I've known that have worked over in Africa found African women to be much more attractive than African American women, which is kind of an argument against mongrelization. They're like, the one guy who was a kickboxer that spent some time over in Kenya, he said, I dated the local women over there. He said, I would never touch the women over here because they're hideous. He said, but these women were like, they were like an alien race of people, but they were beautiful in their own way because they were distinctive. They weren't just like all look the same. You go into a place like Baltimore, you run into so many people that literally look the same because they're inbred, because there's been no family structure for 60 years, and everybody is getting knocked up by their cousin constantly. I mean, that's the place in America where inbreeding really happens. In a tribal society, you're not going to see that. And, you get this example where with the African American, you're looking in a mutt.
Yeah, and just that it's so urgent to use these so-called diverse images and then to not even find one from America. It just shows how shallow the sentiment is. Like, you could look at this, I'm not a negrologist like you, but I look at this girl and I think, this doesn't look quite right, It
could be deeper. We're looking at bringing in 20 million Africans into this country in the next 10 years. Okay. That's a minimum. He's one of these people. I saw the one Democratic debate where he's one of the people saying that there should be unlimited immigration, open borders, no legal restrictions on immigration. So it might very well just be they all look the same to him, and he's a total racist, and he's just pandering to African Americans, and he actually thinks they're African, and he's going to put this out there. But it might also be something deeper, that he's really a 2024 candidate and getting his platform out there, and he's looking at hopefully having a couple million more African immigrants on the voting rolls voting for him in 4 years, in 8 years, because he's not an older guy. You think about it, this guy is the Biden of the future. I remember when Biden was plagiarizing speeches by British politicians back in the early 90s, and he's still in the political game. So Buttchugger might be the Biden of the future. He might just be feathering his immigrant nest here.
Mayor Pete is undoubtedly what you would call like this deep state asset in the, dark horse in the race or something like this. Like, he's just 100%, like, there's something on his resume that he won't talk about. He worked as a consultant for some shady firm, and he said, I can't tell you about that because I signed an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. Like,
I'm going to write him into the filthy few. Okay. Because I think when the rulers of America get together and ritually rape children every year and get the politicians on film raping children, I think people like Mayor Buttchugger are probably there volunteering, okay, to be treated like the children, kind of like his leaders, like the cow that you put the bell on so that the steers will follow. All right. So he's probably already volunteered to be ritually raped by other American politicians under the supervision of deep state agents. So yeah, I definitely see him as one of those guys. So he'll get a cameo in the filthy few. Okay.
You know what? Now that you bring that up, Sam Finley's been working on a really cool short story that I'll probably publish together with the filthy few.
I've been asking questions, so turnabout's fair play. I'm writing him as a character in the filthy few. I'm going to send it to him for him to proof it and edit his dialogue to get his wording more accurate. So he's also, at the same time, he's writing me into his story, and he's been asking me questions about my injuries and what kind of music I listen to and everything. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm really glad he's doing some fiction, and that he's doing some more. He's doing some more writing.
I'm so glad he is. He's really talented, and his book is Breakfast with the Dirt Cult, and that's one that you should read if you haven't, listeners. But he's a really talented writer, and he has a lot of good things to say, and his fiction is turning out to be really fun. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. And he's been giving me little sneak peeks. Okay, I'm gonna do one more thing that you're the resident prophet on this podcast, but I think I received a message that you're probably also, maybe you also received it, but I was listening to Ed Calderon on Joe Rogan, and then I was recalling an article that Baruch had sent to both of us about signals intelligence in Afghanistan and how they analyze. They have this enormous data center on site in Afghanistan to analyze all this massive data of cell phones and things like that they monitor over there. So Ed Calderon I'm just learning about him, but he's a really interesting guy. He's Mexican. He might be an American citizen, or I think he has a green card, but he lives in America now, and he's an expert on like border security and what's going on with the cartels and drug trade, and he likes knives and he likes guns, so he's just right up my alley. But he gave this great interview, and it sounds like, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it sounds like he wants the cartels to be declared by the U.S. government as terrorist organizations, because that would unleash, greater firepower, which is good for him, good for business.
Sure. I have to disagree with Mr. Calderon. I see the Mexican drug cartels as mental health NGOs servicing the American delusion. Where would we be without our rampant drug addiction?
He talks about that.
Imagine if everybody in this country woke up at the same time. It would be like this giant brain just having this horrific, aneurysm. It would just be like the exploding brain. It would be horrible. It might short circuit the magnetic field of the Earth or something like that, and send us tumbling out into the galaxy. It would be terrible. Americans cannot. You can't let them wake up. It's the sleeping giant. You got to keep them drugged up.
He talks about the absolute massive size of the demand for drugs in America, and that's a big. It's a question that you can't really answer, like how it's just something everybody needs to be high all the time, whether it's illicit or illicit drugs. But he, putting yourself in his shoes, where he's an expert on this type of work, enforcement work against the cartels. Of course, he wants more of that work,
sure.
And that sounds like fun.
Besides, it's good. It's good work because it does result in killing people, and killing people is good.
All right. There's much more to talk about what he talked about, but he foresees boots on the ground within 5 years, which to me is comical, because there wouldn't be any point to that. But on the other hand, that isn't the point. The point is that our security apparatus needs to be exercised. And so that article that Baruch sent was saying that they're now taking everything they've learned in Afghanistan, and they have these data centers on the border, analyzing signals intelligence, while in Afghanistan they direct drone strikes with that intelligence. Well, here is Mr. Señor Calderon saying that he wants this declaration of terrorist organizations, which would open the door to drone strikes in Mexico. And to me, that just means that's a huge door to the point where there will be drone strikes on U.S. soil. Because if you're striking northern Mexico, it's going to be like this. Like, some general with all these stripes on his chest is going to go on CNN and be like, well, we've been striking in northern Mexico, but there's some targets that are on U.S. soil, and we just can't strike those because that's the rules. And the journalists...
Well, the southwestern U.S. will become the Pakistan to the Afghanistan.
And the journalists will just...
You got to strike them
they'll shake their heads and say, wow, you would think that they would trust you, to strike the U.S. soil if you really, really need to. And then there's going to be a secret court where they're just going to say, hey, just this one time, we're going to...
Well, Cambodia to Vietnam, Laos to Vietnam. There's always, when you get into imperial war, there's always a benefit to it because you can start a war next door and not declare it. Besides, according to the United States, Mexico, the United States, and Canada are the homeland.
That's right.
Okay, so ultimately, the legions have to come home. They have to be turned against the real enemy of the global system, which is the American people, and they will be. And this is just a stepping stone towards that. And guys like Calderon are going to be, he's going to be the guy dragging you out of your bed if you're a gunsmith in the Rocky Mountains, okay? And they think you're making guns for the wrong people. Just like that Jocko guy, he's going to be the guy, putting a knife in the base of your skull in the men's room or the bar that you're at because you're a gunsmith somewhere in Arkansas. These guys will all do it. They'll send somebody like Lloyd DeJong after me, and he'll slit my throat for the deep state. Okay? I mean, that's the way it's going to work. And ultimately, I would do the same thing if I had the talent of these guys and I was trying to make money and wanted to practice warrior skills instead of being a writer. Yeah, I would hire out to the evil deep state to come to your town and cut your throat. I would do it, but I'm not that level of talent. I'm past that stage of my life, and I'm not enough. Even when I was young, I wasn't enough of a team player. Okay, so
this is...
Yeah, I mean, saying these guys are wrong for doing it.
No, I don't think... I kind of get what you're saying. I don't know if it's... I hope it doesn't really look like that, but it very well might. But what I foresee is that this is the door that will open to more of this type of enforcement on U.S. soil, which previously had been really forbidden, But look, like Calderon, he's a really strong Second Amendment. Like he was on Rogan, okay, and Rogan reveals himself to be much more of a mainstream stooge than he normally sounds like. But he just tries to get this guy to talk everything he doesn't like about America. Well, tell me what you don't like about America. There's plenty of things I don't like about America, but it's just such an easy and cheap way to get your back patted, I think, in the media.
Well, one good thing about America is America's drug addiction has resulted in the destruction of an unworthy state, which is the state of Mexico. Okay, Mexico was unable to defeat the Apaches. The Spanish Empire was unable to defeat the Apaches, and the Mexican nation was unable to defeat the Apaches. The Comanches, once they got a hold of the horse, they annihilated the Apaches. Okay, and then they beat the shit out of the Mexicans, and they were making the Mexicans pay tribute. And the Apaches were making an alliance with the Mexicans. And now the Apaches have been the boogeymen of Mexico for 300 years. People were terrified of them. There's even a deck of Mexican playing cards that has the Apache as a bad guy. And he looks like a Woodlands Indian. It's kind of cute. Now, in the end, the U.S. government ends up taking down the Comanches. And the reason why Texans were invited to settle in Texas was as a buffer against the Comanches. Okay, eventually these Americans take down the Comanches, and then they're unable to take down the Apaches because the Apaches adapted to the Comanche threat. They figured out how to be foot soldiers in the mountains. They got off the Great Plains. So what did he need to get? Geronimo only had 2 warriors and 60 women and children. There's 3 dudes. That was his whole army. 5,000-man army of U.S. Army could not take these guys down. Well, the other 500 Apaches, they were all on the side of the U.S. Army, and they tracked Geronimo's ass down. Okay, so that's called around. That's everybody. The guy I'm staying with, the colonel right now, okay, 10 years ago, he worked for Halliburton. Okay, he could have been assigned to take me out if I was overseas. If I was doing like the Daily Stormer guy and I was overseas or something like that, he might have been hired to take me out. Okay, so this is just what warriors do to maintain their warrior identity. They go to work for their ultimate enemy, and they work as the scout. With the defeated tribe, their warriors become the scouts for the system that defeats them. This is just what happens. Liver Eaton Johnson, that's what he did. He ran away from the American military machine, to become a mountain man and a scout, and he ends up scouting for the American military machine because the machine catches up to him and enlists him as an ally. This is just what happens. It's what empires do, and it's how warriors at least maintain that. As long as the warrior identity stays alive, then when that corrupt empire finally implodes, that'll still be there, and it can form the basis for something new. So even though it's killing people in the service of evil, I don't see it as ultimately evil, because I think the killer tradition will outlive the evil empire and be there to support something new that's a real tribal society. And that's what the novel I'm working on this weekend's about.
Well, Calderon is definitely a tribal guy. He talks about he went to Kentucky, and he kind of makes a sound of like, wow, Kentucky. And Joe, you can tell he's ready to hear about the despicable racism. And this guy says, Kentucky, I love Kentucky. Kentucky is white Mexico. All right. And then when Joe tries to get him to talk shit about America, he says, I hate to see what they're trying to do to the Second Amendment. He says, what else? What else do you hate about this? Is literally Joe saying, what else do you hate about America? He says that some of the youth he sees, including the Mexican American youth, is so weak and so sensitive and so easy to hurt their feelings. So to me, he's, I just...
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, I just immediately feel a kinship to him, partly because I am also Latina and partly because he's speaking, the LaFondian language. But how you pointed out that these guys they go to work for the system because the system can use their talents. And where else, they're not going to use their talents sitting in a gray cubicle typing on a computer. So that's what happens. But I like him, and I might, just warning you, I might try to email him and ask if he'll come on our podcast. So I don't know. I won't do that for a while, but I'm thinking about it. We might speak Spanish.
Well, you know what? You should do a Spanish language Crackpot podcast. Okay. And what I could say, mucho buenos nalgas. I think that's about.
What?
I have a half memory of compliments for strippers from my time hanging out with Mexican floor crew guys. But Peches Grande. I can remember El Gordo. I think that was the fat one.
La Gorda. El Gordo is a fat man. You don't want a fat man. You want La Gorda.
Well, they hated this big fat black guy that I worked with, so they'd call him El Gordo with a sneer.
I thought you were asking for the fat stripper.
Okay. No.
Well.
Okay. Well, the next time I go to the Latino strip club with the man from Uncle, I'll say, La Gorda, La Gorda.
Or La Gordita.
You can
ask for La Gordita.
La Gordita?
Gordita. It doesn't matter. I don't know what I'm doing here. Well, let me get my spreadsheet out again. This is... I'm just kidding. I'm not going to make you look at the spreadsheet. But I think that's probably good for today. I think I might put this together. Well, let's see. Let me see if I have anything else to hit on. We did Plantation America, and then we did it a little bit. We had to do it twice because last time I goofed up the taping, and we talked Under an Iron Crown. That's probably good for today. La Gordita.
All right.
Hey, Crackpot listeners. I'm going to add a little bit to this podcast, and it's a couple of sections from the bookstore tour that we gave for the Masculinity Bookstore. So the next few minutes can be found on another video elsewhere, but I wanted to include it here so that you could hear it as part of a regular podcast because I think you'll really like it. All right, enjoy. All right, we have 3 more titles that haven't been published, which are Why Grown-Ups Suck, Woke Devil, and
Why
The
Grown-Ups
Island
Suck?
of Broken Men.
Oh, This Island of Broken Men, another masculinity book that's really current. A lot of Q&As with guys that are trying to, meatheads are trying to think, or big brain nimbuses that are trying to man up. And this is the thing, the big challenge that we've got. And you know what? When I'm together with a bunch of meatheads, I'm the nerd. All these guys could kick the shit out of me. If I'm with dudes that are like truly successful fighters and the guys that were war fighters and stuff like that and hunters, I'm the little twerpish nerd. Okay. I might be a pain in the ass to fight. I might be hard to kill, but I'm not the alpha male. I'm kind of like the weird outsider. So like, I'm a historian in any boxing gym I'm at. Guys trying to make sure I don't get hurt because they consider me too delicate. So I'm in this middle ground. Hey, darling, I'm in this middle ground between those dudes and then the big brain nimbus guys. The galactic brains, the super smart guys that want to man up, but society has incubated them against this. And their families have worked against it. Everything has worked against it. These guys have actually been put under the gun. And the very big brain that they developed that helped them figure out a lot of lies that a lot of meatheads could never see has kind of prevented them from engaging, really the liberating side of dissidence, which is just being a guy that does the most taboo thing that you could do in civilization, in the sissy matrix, which is fight. Particularly fight for the hell of it. Just fight because you want to fight, okay? In a ritual context. Almost everybody on the planet hates that, except for the people that pay to see a dude lose. They don't pay to see a guy win. They pay to see a dude lose so they can make fun of him, okay? So this is the challenge, and it's kind of the focus of that book and my later masculinity writing that's all spread now in between, along with the Harm City and the travel and everything, which is the idea of bringing the physical and the intellectual aspects of the masculine conditions together, because it is not just one or the other. Okay, it doesn't work if it's just one.
People are really resistant to that idea, and reading, I'm just one more layer of connection where I can share your work with guys that probably need it. I have nothing to say on it myself, but what I have learned is that masculinity, and even like this word patriarchy that people intone like it means something, it's really what men do together. It's not this mirror image of feminism, which is where a man wants a legal framework to control women, And I sympathize with the fact that our society's been really damaged by divorce and single motherhood and stuff. So I don't support those things. But when men start to like whine and boohoo about how we need this patriarchy to control women, I just think, well, that's not even what it is to me. It's what men do in their own sphere to develop themselves and create a social environment that is functional for everybody else.
We're going to lose a combination 10 YouTube subscribers,
yeah.
and Facebook likes right now,
yeah.
Because I'm telling you, patriarchy is for bitches. Okay,
that's
what patriarchy is.
Yeah, it's like you're calling
it comes
daddy
from
government.
Civilization.
It's daddy government to come and tell your women what to do.
Okay, you got Who's the biggest sissy group out there? They got to strap on vests and get their women to commit suicides with bombs strapped to them, okay? They're the Arabs. The Arabs are the biggest sissy fucknuts out there, okay? They need the whole village and the government to keep their women in line, okay? Now, where does that come from? That's the ancient cradle of these early civilizations. Iraq, boom, right there. So what is early civilization? It is the nomads coming in and conquering the cucked out goddess worshipping river civilizations and then taking every dude there, turning him into, and the consolation prize he gets for being disarmed and emasculated is he now gets to be the head of the household, which is traditionally the woman's role. So the patriarchy in Middle Eastern society has almost always produced substandard warrior cultures because the men are predominantly behaving like women in a merchant way and trying to micromanage things and always looking for leverage. They might do good politically. They might do good financially. They might have a lot of slave girls. Okay, but a lot of their men aren't getting any pussy, okay? They're just not getting any action because you're essentially, the rich dudes are buying the broads, and they're very rarely any good in combat. How many of them do you see really essentially good in MMA, in boxing? Okay, they're always getting outclassed by other cultures of people. So if you need a whole village of guys to keep your old lady in line, while you're off kicking the shit out of some other dude? No, I mean, that's just wrong. I mean, what you need is a little brother or a best friend or a father-in-law or a dad or a granddad that's going to protect your wife while you're away, okay? And so you go do your thing and you come back, and she's glad to have you back. You know, this got totally maimed by the feminism thing because it sent you both out of the house, and then you're coming back at the same time. All right, so, you know, yeah, there's a direct there's a direct attack on masculinity implicit in patriarchy. I'll have fun with the patriarchy thing, okay? You know, but it comes from slavery. Patriarchy is not based on anything else. All the patriarchs of the Bible owned numerous men who were not allowed to bear arms. They owned children. They owned women. They owned slave girls. They had the authority that the king was going to send some killers out to keep anybody in line. That dude didn't have the authority to beat up all those, the masculine authority to beat up all those servants. They're afraid of the king with his band of thugs. Okay? It was like a moral feudalism. Okay? Conjoined with these slave economics. And I cover that in Happily Ever Under. That's in the biblical. I do 2 biblical chapters on it. It basically demonstrates how this works.
I think it's covered in masculine axis as well because we talked about how within African cultures there's more of what we perceive as matriarchy, where women own property and because women do kind of like a type of agriculture which isn't like what farming we do, but anyway, it's kind of a gardening. The point is that their social structure is what we would call matriarchal, but it isn't really in contrast to patriarchy. Like in European cultures and families, paternity is very important. You know, your kids are your kids, and your wife's not supposed to be having other people's kids, where that isn't super important in African cultures. It's a huge generalization, okay? But anyway, that's covered in masculine axis. I mean, the truth is that there are 2 different spheres and they overlap, the men's sphere and the women's sphere. And it's not, rejecting patriarchy is not saying that the single motherhood married to the government is a good alternative. It's not it's not a good alternative.
Well, patriarchy is what we have now with a narco-tyranny. You've got women married to the government, voting for the government against their men. That's patriarchy. That's pure patriarchy. You just take the men on the ground out of it. That's what patriarchy does. You go back and read the book of Job. Almost every dude in that's a slave. Okay? Job is some kind of petty king or clan leader or tribe leader or something like that. And most of the men under him are slaves, including his sons. Okay? And that's what patriarchy does. It makes most men slaves. And eventually, once you put democracy in, then the women get direct connection with the power structure. Instead of the patriarchs having that direct connection, it accretes up to a single patriarchy grouped together on the top instead of the local patriarchy.
And I think it fosters a lot of hostility between men and women, where you see these really hostile guys on the right wing that believe, well, first they believe that all women they have these weird ideas about women. It's not like women are innocent angels, but they have these ideas that just are not reality about how wicked women are and how our instincts are destructive. And, you might say that too because of this democracy thing, but it's because women's instincts are relative to a different sphere. And so, yeah, you take these protective instincts and these socialistic instincts, which make sense in a family setting, and they don't make sense on larger scales. But I just see this hostility on the part of the men. I think it's this feeling that sometime in the past there was some kind of idyllic situation where women obeyed their men and where every man got a girlfriend, like when he turned 18 or something, he got issued a lifetime intimate partner and he didn't have to worry about that anymore. And that now that all the risk of marriage is on men. And I just think there's always been risk in marriage, and there's inherent risk for women. So I would like to see your model of masculinity make some inroads there.
Well, it's an example of how patriarchy causes emasculation, because most of the guys don't get laid, or they've all got to go after the same whore, okay, which might have been a dancer way back in the day. Now, who knows? Maybe it's some kind of like virtual online girlfriend or something. Who knows? Generally, guys that are currently banging broads, okay, are not demonstrating a bunch of animosity towards women. The guys that demonstrate animosity towards women generally aren't getting laid. They have fallen for the whole goddess construct of civilization, and at some point they let the fact that they had a mother and not a daddy and a teacher in school that was a female or a faggot get them into a state of worship of the feminine as like this high ideal, and the masculine stuff like killing people and beating people up, that's all bad, okay, and it's not good. And masculine, yin and yang, the yang, the masculine is dark and the masculine is violent, and the woman is all good. And then they end up putting this normal woman on a pedestal, and then she fails to live up to their expectations. Now, one thing that guys that aren't getting laid and haven't had a lot of experience with women do not understand is that women are a lot more loyal than men. And now when racially oriented men look at the fact that women always sell their own men, black women have sold all their own men down the road into prison and put them on the government farm for money. White women have sold their men down the political road to taken their wages away, cut their wages in half, are totally sidelining them through elite politicians and money grubbers. This is loyalty. This is an expression of loyalty. Women are loyal to the patriarchy. All right? So now the patriarchy only consists of the super elite white men. That's it. That's all the patriarchy is. Super elite white men. You got the dissonant super elite white dude Trump out there. Most of the super elite white dudes hate the regular white dudes. Okay, scared to death of the black dudes, and they use the women, the direct appeal of the women through the democracy engine and the woman's natural high level of loyalty to the patriarchy to screw almost all the dudes out there. Okay, that's how it works. And if we lose a whole bunch, I hope we lose like 100 YouTube subscribers and like 10 Facebook likes on that. I really know that we did a good job of sorting terminal sissies out of this batch right here. Okay, so thanks a lot for taking me down this road, dear. I'm currently unraveling. Did 7,000 words of Night Song of the Nords today. Actually had the most misogynistic battle scene I've ever written. Okay, just like, oh yeah, brutality and misogyny, boom. Like on the battlefield, it was pretty good. So, that masculinity ended up being the right path to go down here.
I think so too. You seem to be a little more cheerful now that we've discussed all those things. I don't know if we said much about why grown-ups suck and woke devil.
Oh, okay. Dude, thank you. Woke Parenting Handbook. It's basically guerrilla warfare for children to wake them up right before the teenage zombie apocalypse, when basically children become like these insane minor league adults. Okay. And then that's it. It's pretty much a done deal. So it's a way to try to salvage the honesty of the childhood mind by writing a book that'll hopefully get snuck in by some grandparents into the hands of their children and give them some clues on how to avoid brainwashing by their parents, because their parents have been brainwashed and the parents lie to you. Grown-up society is based on theft. All right. There's good parents out there, but most grown-ups suck. And at this point, you think about it, most grown-ups aren't your parents, and they're out there to screw you over if you're a kid. Okay, so if you're lucky enough to get a good parent that might give you a book like this, then, I think it would give you a big edge up. It started with a friend of mine that was a school teacher that wanted me to become a school teacher and teach children. And I came up with my first day's curriculum knowing that I would get taken out in handcuffs at the end of the first day or at the beginning of the second day. Probably the beginning of the second day after these kids went home and told their parents what I was teaching them.
So we talked a little bit about this with Sean and his family. The point is that some parents, especially Sean and his family, for example, are really, really good parents, and there's this boomer aspect of like that you can't trust anyone over 30, or that it's like that from the song. I think they fuck you up, your mom and dad. I would say with great confidence that you would be welcome among the homeschooling families that I know, that we're just always looking for interesting and fun things to do with our kids, and imparting, especially in the group that I'm in, we really value a classical approach. So when you're talking about public school, which could be either a prison-like setting, or in our area, we also have these really incredibly competitive and high-stress settings for kids. And, either of those, I think you would not do well in.
Well, those are the grown-ups that suck the most.
Yeah.
This isn't why parents suck. This is why grown-ups suck. And if you have good parents, your biggest enemies and their biggest enemies are the school teachers. I mean, school teachers should pretty much just all be taken out and sold into slavery, okay, working as strippers or janitors or, librarians or whatever, okay, unpaid to put up for the sins of, brainwashing children and attacking families. So that's the idea of it. And for instance, my parents lied to me about everything. They didn't know it was lies. They were repeating the lies that their parents told them, okay, and then so on down the line. And nobody's lied to their children more than the boomers. And see, the boomers know. The boomers are the biggest liars out there. They know. That's that whole drug-addicted generation. Okay? So it's just most people. Civilization makes a parent a slave. Just having a child makes you a slave and puts you under the gun. Just like the man under civilization becomes a slave. Okay? Like the origin of the word husband. Okay? Puts him under the gun, and his wife and his children are hostages that the government can hold against him. All right, so most grown-ups are forced to suck by the matrix of civilization. And this is why we still got a third of our parents still beat their children. Although tribal societies, except for the Aborigines, just never did that. Because it didn't make any sense.
Well, there's this thing where, like, as a parent, whether it's modern age or what, there's certain things you have to make your kids do. Can you stop that noise, please? Like, be quiet sometimes, and brush their teeth, and go to bed on time, and wake up on time. And this isn't going anywhere. Even as a homeschooling mom, I need to brush my kids' teeth, and I have 2 children, and one of them I had to wrestle to the floor every day of her life, wrestled her down to the bath rug, and while she was screaming, provided an open mouth so that I could brush her teeth. And she can remember this, and honestly, I think in order to equal that level of trauma would take a lot of spankings. But that was just what we had to do to brush your teeth, honey.
Well,
So,
the point is the government coercion, the fact that every parent is threatened by force, okay, as part of the subtext of his or her life every day, okay, is going to result in high levels of force being used against children in comparison to the same racial groups in pre-civilized societies. Okay, that's just what happens. It's baked into the cake because it's a buildup of tension. It's when you have people living under threat, physically in charge of other people, there's going to be more force used than is used when you're not living under threat, particularly when the threat is implicit and it's not obvious all the time, but you can never get away from it. If you break a traffic law anywhere in this country, you can be pulled out of your car and beat up by some law officer anywhere you go. And everybody knows that, even though they might say it's not so. Okay, and that's in there. All right. And you don't have a history of children being ritually beaten, like Melville's stepmother beating him every day with a weapon, until you have a slave society where the slaves are regularly beaten by their master, because slaves are generally governed by the same rules that govern children. That's why they tend to be pretty well treated in Aboriginal and barbarian societies, at least low barbarian societies, because they're treated like children and eventually sold out or adopted in. So the other one is woke devil, which is masculinity in the context of race, particularly what is apparently the only racial continuum that's permitted, which is like ebony and ivory. I mean, it's our society is so sick that there's like only one dualistic racial dynamic. And like most of the people in the world who are Asians and mestizos don't even exist. I mean, it's just crazy. It's totally insane. But it's about kind of how I've used that, generally relationships with African American men, largely building alliances with them to overcome feral African American men on one hand and the sissy merchant mentality white man on the other hand, and the cops who are their own race, they're blue. That's what that's about. Some fun back and forth with, different woke ebony devils, including some apprentice ebony devils. That's the thing about woke deviltry is I was originally titling it Magic Negroes and White Devils. Okay. But that would get me in too much trouble. So it's now a woke devil, because basically how woke devils of the ebony and ivory variety can work together to undermine the whole sissy system.
this brings me to another point, which is that if you have strong masculinity, then gender relations are better. It's also true with race relations, because you have all sorts of friendships and working relationships and other situations where a masculine man can either manage the sissies or work on the same level with another masculine man. Whereas a lot of these sissies on the right wing are like, they want Sharia on white women, and they want some kind of government enforced ethnic cleansing or something, So to me, it's very similar. Like, you still need daddy to come and help you for whatever's your problem,
Yeah. I would suggest to any of the young men that are upset with my idea that you have to cultivate your woman's loyalty. It's very easy to get a woman loyal to you. It's easier than with a guy. Okay. If you can't do it, send her to me. Okay. All right. And we'll make it so. If you can't manage a woman, okay, then you should be like, a bandit or a pirate, a serial killer, or something. You should be some whack job out there just hunting people if you can't manage a woman. Because if you got any human empathy, you should be able to manage. Okay.
Getting late and we've got shit to do in outer space. Mother Earth can wait. We will take the ones worth saving. Pack your bags, we are vacating now. Forever, forever. There's a cosmic radio in my head, and it's reading news articles, and the correspondent sadly said the universe is flat. He also mentioned that gravity is caused by our cavities and our reflection of time's not a receding hairline, it's all mass produced in the back of our mind. There's some things that we will never know, and I don't ever want to know. And so it goes. Let's fuck it up, let us run amok. Let's do the things that we want to do. We're animals after all. Out yonder through the traffic and the